Welcome to today's workshop. It is going to be a really fun one, as you can already see from the colorful food in front of us. I want to welcome you as well as Dr. Linda Shiue here with us, and also Amy. I am Michelle Jones with Full Plate Living, and I am very excited to get this started. It was so exciting meeting her earlier this year, and I did get to taste some of this food, and I can tell you that it is absolutely delightful. So Dr. Linda Shiue is an internal lifestyle and culinary medicine physician and professionally trained chef. She's the director of culinary medicine and lifestyle medicine at Kaiser Permanente, where she founded a teaching kitchen for patients and a consultation service in lifestyle and culinary medicine, and created a culinary medicine elective. She is the author of a cookbook, and I have a copy of it. It is called Spicebox Kitchen. Oh, when I see it on camera, there we go. You can connect with Dr. Shiue on social media, and it's at Spicebox Travels. And we're also going to go ahead and share a couple more links. Amy's going to post them either now or at the end of the workshop for you. And at this time, I can't wait to get into the food. So let's turn it over to you, Dr. Shiue. Thank you again for being here.
Yes, thank you so much, Michelle and Amy, and welcome everybody. I'm so excited. I've been looking at the chat to see where everyone's coming from, and it is so diverse, which is really exciting. So welcome. So as you heard in my introduction, I'm a doctor, but also a chef, a cooking teacher, cookbook author. I love to cook, but even more than that, I actually love to teach cooking, which I've been doing now for half of my career. So going on my 13th year of teaching healthy cooking to patients. The reason for that is I realized after 10 years of being in medical practice that if I didn't talk about food and give really practical tips, not only tips, but actual lessons on how to cook healthy, I wasn't actually able to help my patients get to their best health. So that's really the goal here. This is the way that I really love to practice medicine, by teaching cooking, in addition to my general medical practice and consultations in lifestyle and culinary medicine. So that's enough about me. Let's get to the food. So today is going to be a grain bowl workshop. And I've done many iterations of this over the years. And I'm honestly a little bit always surprised by how much people like this. But then I realize when I see Elizabeth from Long Island, that's where I'm from. So hello, Long Island too. How much people like this. And I realized because it's very practical. And in addition to my professional roles, I'm also, I am a busy working person. My children are now in college and one just graduated, but was a busy working mother. So I understand one of the main reasons why people don't cook more often is time, right? So if you can do things that will save time, you will eat better. And I know we all want to eat better, just sometimes things get in the way. And so at the end, and what you'll get in the handout that you'll get in the end will be practical tips on how to use this for meal prep. But we'll be using what you see in front of you to make delicious foods that feature some of the most important things to prolong your life and prevent disease. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce you to the ingredients first, just give you an overview of them. And then I will show you how to make 3 different plant-based proteins in a very simple and flavorful way that you can then adapt to many other dishes besides what you see here. And as a chef, it's all about flavor. And so I will then show you 3 different sauces that you can make at home. And then I will assemble 3 different grain bowls. So we're going to do lots of things in 3s. So to get started, I'm going to show you the grains that I have in front of you. So whole grains are basically the opposite of refined grains. What does that mean? That means a grain that has 3 components. It has the outer bran, which is full of fiber. It has what's called the germ, which has a lot of the nutrients, including various vitamins and minerals. So that includes B vitamins, iron, and several other things which are really important for your overall health, including your heart health and your neurologic health, which affects your brain functioning. And that also has the part that a refined grain has, which is all carbohydrate, which we need for energy. But the refined grains lack all of those other things, which are the fiber, vitamins, and minerals. And that is why we encourage whole grains. And the beauty of it from the perspective of a chef is that gives you so much more flavor, variety, and different textures. So I've just chosen 3 here to show you, but there are dozens and dozens. And one site that I'd like to tell you about that you can learn about almost all the whole grains is called the wholegrainscouncil.org, and you can take a look at that. But so I'm going to show you one first. This is quinoa. So I'm going to show it to you, and you'll see in my 2 cameras, you've got the close-up and then what I'm showing you in this camera. So I'm going to kind of show you in both. This is quinoa. That's a cooked version, and this is what it looks like before cooking. Really very similar. Quinoa is actually a seed. It's in the same family as beet and chard, and it cooks up really quickly and is gluten-free. It's a great source, as all of these are, of both fiber, carbohydrate, and protein, as well as many other nutrients. So that's the first one, and I'll move that out of the way for now. And then next, I'm going to show you barley. Of the 3 grains I'm showing you today, barley is the one which does contain gluten. The other grains in that category, for those people who cannot digest gluten or have a gluten intolerance or celiac disease, there are actually only 4 grains that contain gluten. Barley is one of them. The other is wheat, and then the other 2 are rye and triticale. This is what barley looks like when it's uncooked. Kind of similar in size and texture to brown rice, which would be a good gluten-free substitute for this. In terms of texture, this is similar, as I mentioned, to brown rice, but also to farro, which is another gluten-containing whole wheat grain. And then the final I'm showing you today is, let's see if I can show you here, wild rice. Which is an interesting one that, basically grows in water. It looks very different of all of these. I think this looks the most different when it is raw versus cooked. And so this will give you a variety of flavors, a variety of nutrients, but all of them have a lot of fiber, protein, nutrients, as well as energy-giving carbohydrates. So you'll be seeing these later as the base for our 3 different grain bowls. Just give me a moment to move these out of the way. And then what you see here is the rainbow of vegetables we're going to top our grain bowls with. The key things about this, there are 2. One is for aesthetic reasons, right? It's really pretty, and we eat with our eyes first, right? We like foods that look appealing. And so it's not just a nicety, it's almost a necessity when you're doing healthy eating to make it look beautiful. And that's really easy in nature because plants are full of different colors. The other significant thing about this rainbow of colors is that it makes it very easy for you to get the range of vitamins, minerals, and antioxidants. Different colors actually correspond to different antioxidants and vitamins in nature. And so while some of you might be very interested in learning a lot about all the different nutrients in every food that you eat, that's overwhelming for most of us. And I would say unnecessary, because if you get the full range of colors, as you see here, you're going to get a wide range and not have to worry about balancing it. So that is my key. Again, I like to make things very easy because I know while we all, as people, have high hopes of doing things perfectly, making it very detailed, when life gets busy, it's hard to do that. So I would encourage you to make it simple for yourself and just kind of think, eat the rainbow. And that refers not to the candy that uses that same slogan, but to the rainbow of produce. So we'll be coming back. These will be one of the other toppings for our grain bowls. I'll move this out of the way for now as well. So, as I mentioned, I'm going to start with teaching you about various plant-based proteins and how to prepare those. The first one, which I'm going to show you, is going to be tofu. Tofu is a really great source of both protein, fiber, and calcium. But if you're someone who did not grow up eating tofu, which I did, it often can be a mystery to people. And the things that I hear from people about why they may not like tofu until they get familiar with it are two things. Flavor, a lot of people find it bland or mild, too mild. And then texture, it's just soft. I happen to like tofu in all of the ways, whether it's, unflavored, where I'm just really tasting the pure flavor of tofu, which is made out of soybeans, made into soy milk, and then made into this soft, firm block of protein. Well, I like all of that. I think what has worked out for me to address those two issues of flavor and texture for people who are new to tofu is to pan fry it. Now, you can get tofu made crispy in many other ways, but often that is coated in a starch and then deep fried. And that takes several other steps and uses more oil than you may want to use, even if it's simply for the reason of the mess that it takes to deep fry something. So I've kind of perfected my own technique for pan frying tofu, which will give you a crunchy texture with a minimum of oil. And that texture actually adds a little bit of flavor. The frying adds a little bit of flavor and allows any sauce that you're going to apply to it to cling well to the tofu. So I'm going to start with that first, actually, because it takes the longest. And I'm also going to show you two other plant-based proteins, two beans that I'm going to show you simple ways of flavoring. So those are going to be these cannellini beans. And these, I'm starting here with canned beans, which I encourage you to use, or at least sometimes, because it saves time. Now, definitely it's less expensive and you get better flavor and texture, to be honest, from using dried beans, but not everybody wants to do that or has time or can plan ahead to make the dried beans. So keeping a few cans around of beans is a handy thing to do so that you don't ever run out of a plant-based protein. So I'll be showing you how to simply season some cannellini beans. And then the other beans I'm going to show you are chickpeas, which I'll show you a way of highlighting and making very flavorful with different spices. So those will come next while the tofu is cooking, but I'm going to move that out of the way so I can show you how to prepare the tofu. Okay, so as I mentioned, for the tofu, I want to make this crispy, crunchy. So I'm going to mock up and talk through the first steps that would take too long to share in this forum today. The first is I would invite you to try some firm tofu. Tofu comes in many different textures, from silken, soft, regular, firm to extra firm. I prefer firm because it holds together well and has, I think, a creamier texture than extra firm. However, to be able to make it crunchy, you need to do a couple of things. So what I've already done is first I opened it up, drained it, and then I wrapped it in a couple of layers of paper towel, okay? Then what I did and what I'm going to mock up here is I put it between two cutting boards. And what I did was I used a heavy cutting board on top, which weighs at least 1 pound. But you could do this with a lighter cutting board and a 1 pound pan or something else like that. And you're basically sandwiching the tofu, you see it's under there, for at least half an hour. What that does, it's going to compress it and push out some of the excess water, which will make it hold together more. And now that I've done it, I can take this out of the way. So we've got it compressed, and that will hold together more. So it's good for stir fries and things like that. And then I unwrap it. Okay, so that's the next step of it. And then you want to pat it dry. So I have another dry towel here, just to get rid of any excess moisture on the surface, because that's what's going to touch the pan. And then I cut it into whatever size pieces I want. I'll probably only do half of it now for the purposes of this demo, but it cooks so quickly, you'll see. It's basically 10 minutes or less to get it nice and crunchy on two different sides, which I'll show you next. So you do want to cut it into whatever serving size you want. I usually, as you can see here, will reduce its thickness by cutting it in half that way. Okay, so we've got two pieces here. And then I cut it into whatever bite-sized pieces I want. So that's what I'm doing here. I'm going to cut it into, I think, little cubes this time. Okay, so now we've got compressed cubes of tofu. You could use it just like this, but it won't be crunchy. So again, it won't have a texture that some people like. So now I'm going to pivot my, this low tech here, but pivot my camera to the stove. And you'll see my frying pan here. So before I actually do this, I'm going to talk about the other key steps to getting your perfect crunchy tofu. You need a non-stick pan. Otherwise, it will stick and then you'll lose your crunchy topping. The next thing you want to do is you want to heat your pan, and about 1 tablespoon of oil, any kind of oil is fine. And you want to make sure that's hot before you put your tofu in. These are key. If you skip any of these key points, you won't have a great result. On the website, which they're going to be sharing with you, I do have a cooking video that features this, actually, and a lot of other things that I'll be showing you today, so that in addition to watching this video over, if you just want to go directly to the pan frying tofu, you can find that as well. So if you look at this close-up camera here, I'm just making sure the oil is spread around the pan, and sort of just waiting for about 30 seconds until it seems like it's getting hot enough. And when it gets hot enough, I'm going to transfer my tofu. So the next thing, so I mentioned using a nonstick pan, heating the pan and the oil, is that you want to make sure each piece of tofu is kind of dragged or touches the oil so that it's able to crisp up, okay? So it doesn't have to sit in it, but it has to have a little bit basically on its surface. And that's what I'm doing here. And then the last sort of key thing to know here is that you want to leave a little bit of space. As you can see, I'm arranging it with a little bit of space here. It doesn't need quite this much, but some space so that the heat can circulate so that it can get crispy. I'm going to make this look nice on camera here. Okay, so that's going to sit there kind of like ring around the rosy right now. And it'll take about 5 minutes on each side to get to the color of a cutting board. I think that's the easiest way. Golden brown. It can be a little, a little bit lighter, a little bit darker, but I find that the color of a cutting board is kind of the nice ideal for getting a crunchy texture. So I will fry it on 2 sides. That's going to be about 5 minutes on each side. And we're just going to let that, you can watch it for me. And while we're doing that, I'll talk you through the next 2 bean recipes that I'm going to show you. So we're going to bring my tray back. And for this, I'm not going to use a close-up camera because it's focused on the tofu. But I'm going to talk next about the cannellini beans, which I've already actually prepared here. And talk about how easy this is. So the reason why I brought the can is to mention that canned beans are fine. When possible, get ones that say no sodium added, low sodium maybe, but I want you to read the label because some brands that are labeled low or less or reduced sodium actually can have more sodium than others that are not labeled as such. And the one that I have as an example, it says organic and made with sea salt, and actually has less sodium than some brands that have low sodium. So always look at your label. This one has 130 milligrams per serving of these cannellini beans. The other things to reduce sodium, if that is important for you, is to drain it and rinse under cold running water. That will reduce your sodium even further to about half of what it started out with. Easy tips there. So as part of going to culinary school, of course, I learned about seasoning things. And I also worked in a Michelin-starred restaurant, which is really great for me. And I mention it every time I can. But one of the things I learned there is that in a restaurant, you season every component. You don't just kind of dump a sauce on at the end. Each part can benefit from seasoning. It does not have to be complicated. In this case, with the cannellini beans, I just minced some garlic. So I'm just showing you the garlic as my reminder that that's what I put in here. Some salt and some pepper, and also a little bit of olive oil, and some fresh or dried herbs if you want. And I'm going to actually hold this up to the close-up camera. Let's see. So you can see what it looks like, right? So these are the beans and with their seasonings. All I did after I put in the salt, pepper, olive oil, and minced garlic is I literally shook it up in the container, which can be used later to kind of contain it for any leftovers or as you're preparing it. And then I let it marinate or sit there just for 10 minutes or longer to get flavor. So now we have seasoned beans, which don't even need another sauce. And that is already going to make a grain bowl taste a lot better than if you just use some plain cooked beans. So that is one of our proteins. At this point, I'm going to come back to the tofu because I want to check on it and see if we're there yet. Okay, not quite there, although I'm going to check a few in case it's heating unevenly. I'm going to move them actually a little bit more to the center. And again, keeping some space around them. Okay, so while that is continuing to do its thing, I'm going to talk about chickpeas. So chickpeas are, beloved, and I'll bring it to the close-up camera too, in many different cultures around the world. They are a great source of fiber and of protein. And they're one of the higher protein beans. In fact, a cup of chickpeas has a similar amount of protein to 3 ounces of an animal protein like chicken breast or even red meat, steak. And so that's really important. People are often concerned about their protein intake, in particular if they're transitioning to eating more plant-based. And so the things that I'm highlighting today are all very good protein sources, with chickpeas being actually one of the highest. Tofu also has a lot of protein. The other plant-based proteins I'd like you to consider eating that have a lot of protein, tempeh would be another one of those. That is basically a fermented soybean cake, or block of protein, I should say, not a cake, like a piece of cake, that's made basically fermented from whole soybeans. So unlike tofu, which has to be made into soy milk first and loses a lot of fiber because of that, tempeh is made out of the intact soybean. Very, very high in protein. But the chickpeas, which I will be cooking in the same pan that I'm going to use after the tofu is done, I'm just going to cook with 2 spices, which I will hold up here. This is smoked paprika, which is sort of my magic trick for making plant-based foods taste kind of meaty. And this is powdered garlic. By meaty, I'm referring to the things that people who are giving up meat often miss the most, and that would be things like bacon and ham, processed red meats that have a lot of flavor. Because a smoked paprika the peppers are smoked before it's made into the dried spice, it adds that smokiness, which is different from just adding, heat or flavor or saltiness. It's a smokiness that people really like. And so if you're trying to convert a recipe that originally had like a smoked meat into a plant-based recipe, add some smoked paprika. So I'm going to use these 2 spices to make what I call my smoky Spanish chickpeas. So I'll be doing that in a second, and you'll see how quick that is. But now I think I'm definitely ready to turn over my tofu here. And you'll see how nice and golden it is if you look in the close-up camera. Kind of perfect here. Although you can see that my pan is not quite even because some of them are lighter than others. But the ones in the center are really the color that I'd like you to go for here. As I mentioned, the color of the cutting board. So I'm going to flip these over. And the pan has continued to heat, so the second side will actually cook a little bit faster than the first. But really, it takes about just 5 minutes per side to achieve this beautiful color and crisp texture. If you wanted to, you could go ahead and turn it over on each side and make the whole thing crispy. That will take too long. It's really unnecessary. In terms of like the eating experience, 2 sides is enough. And so this will take just a few more minutes to cook. In the interest of time, and so that I can answer more questions, I think I may not actually do both sides, although we're getting there. So I want to show you the chickpeas next and have plenty of time for the sauces. So we are in TV land now. So let's pretend that it's equally golden on both sides. What this means is I'm going to have to come back and finish up the cooking later, but that's okay. I'm going to plate this now, though, so that it's ready to use in our grain bowls at the end. Okay, so here you can see the part that is actually perfectly cooked. That's what you're going for. All right, so I'm going to set those aside for now. And we're going to move on to our chickpeas. As I mentioned, it's going to come together very quickly. So we're just going to use the same pan here. It still has a little bit of oil in it. I actually had used avocado oil, which is a good neutral oil, but I actually want a little bit of flavor from olive oil for this. And it's about a tablespoon for the entire can of chickpeas. So I'm going to add that now. Both of these are unsaturated fats. Olive oil has the advantage of, if it's extra virgin olive oil, having a lot of polyphenols, which are plant chemicals, which have antioxidant activity, which is really important for your health as well. All right, so the first step is I have my cooked and drained chickpeas. I'm heating my pan a bit, and I'm going to put those in. And so they're sizzling now. I'm not sure how much of that sizzle comes through on camera. So I know that my pan is hot. I'm going to sprinkle my spices on, which again are the smoked paprika and the ground garlic. And it's going to look like a ton of spices, and it really is a lot. But we want this to be super flavorful, and that's what we do here. That's why I have all these spices. I'm going to stir it through. So that it coats basically all parts of the chickpeas. And I'm just going to add like a pinch of salt here, optional. If you're not using any salt, you can leave that out. You're going to have plenty of flavor for the chickpeas. And then we're just going to continue cooking it. Really, this comes together in a couple of minutes until you get basically the spices are coating it completely and sticking on, and you might possibly see some of the chickpeas starting to dry out, meaning like the skin will start to peel a little bit. When that happens, it's ready. But really, if you're not sure about either of those signs, just do it for 3 to 5 minutes. This will give you a very flavorful base however you want to use these. Terrific on grain bowls. As I mentioned, you want every part of your food to have flavor, and as the sort of highlight, the main event, the protein here, we definitely want our protein to be flavorful. This also can go really well as a base for a pasta. So if you put this together with some sauteed kale, it tastes terrific with pasta, either hot and maybe with a little bit of broth to make a sauce with it, or cold in a pasta salad. These are just a few examples, but you can think of many more. And as I mentioned in my handout, I give lots of ideas on how you might use these. And that's it. These are done just like that. So it's really that fast. That's what I really want you to know, that it's truly that quick. So I'm going to transfer these we're going to come back to the cutting board now, and I'm going to transfer them to a bowl. So we have kind of all our proteins in one place. The same flavors, garlic, olive oil, salt, and I lost a few there. Smoked paprika can be used if you want to make this a crunchy chickpea snack, which you might currently be buying in the store. If you do that, what I recommend is, again, draining your chickpeas, drying them as well as you can, remove as much moisture as possible. And then you want to roast those with a little bit of olive oil in the oven at 340 to 400, somewhere in there, rotating it a few times to make sure it kind of gets rotated around until it's crunchy, about 20 minutes, sometimes longer. It depends on how dry you're able to get your chickpeas. Do that before you add the spices. And then when they're crunchy enough, and you can just taste it, see if it's crunchy, then toss it with the spices, because spices are made out of plants, which is a great thing because you get the nutrients that plants have in them, but they can burn. And so for the amount of time that you would need to roast these in the oven to make them crunchy, they could burn. So if you're doing that, same flavorings, but just add the spices at the end. So that's protein number 1. I'm going to transfer my cannellini beans to a nicer looking bowl as well. And then I'll bring over my tofu. Okay, so we've got right here 3 different components of proteins that can be used in our grain bowls and many other things. Okay, so those are the proteins, and in the last segment of this, I'm going to show you 3 different sauces. So I'm actually going to move the proteins to the front a little bit. Okay, let me get my sauces, my sauce components here. Now you'll see that I have everything arranged on different trays. That's for demonstration purposes. However, the same principle can be used when you are cooking. This is called doing your mise en place, which is French, M-I-S-E-E-N-P-L-A-C-E. That means having everything in its place. And what it really means is having everything measured out, prepped, and ready so that the cooking part isn't frantic and you're not in the middle of cooking and realize, oh, I was supposed to mince some garlic. Get it ready. It doesn't have to be as ready as this is because we're not going to be demonstrating it necessarily. But it makes your cooking much easier. So organization is important. Planning ahead is important. All right, so I'm going to show you 3 different bowls, 3 different sauces, which will go with our 3 different proteins and the 3 different grain bowls I'll be putting together in just a few minutes. And I think I'm going to start with what's in front of me and move things out of the way. So one of them is going to be basically an East Asian style soy sauce based dipping sauce. I'm going to show you a couple of options for that. This is a low sodium or less sodium soy sauce. I'll show you there as well. It's still very high in sodium, even though it's about 40% less sodium than regular soy sauce. It's still a high sodium ingredient. If you want to go with something much lower in sodium, you can use coconut aminos, which I'm showing you here, which has about 1/3 the sodium of soy sauce. So important to know. And if you wanted to have a gluten-free option, I don't have an example of that today, but you could, actually the coconut aminos are gluten-free too. There's also tamari, T-A-M-A-R-I, which is a gluten-free version of soy sauce and comes in reduced sodium versions as well. So that's the base. It's going to be some sort of soy flavor. So I've got a little bit of my soy sauce here, and let me actually move these to the board. I think there's too much here for you to look at. I'll go over all of those things. Okay, I think this is better for now. The last sort of ingredient I want to show you is sesame oil. You want to use this kind of Asian toasted sesame oil. It's kind of dark brown in color to get the flavor that we're going for here. So we're just going to stir this all together. So I'm going to make sure you can see the bowl. So I've got my soy sauce. I have my sesame oil that I just showed you. I have some rice vinegar. When you're buying an Asian style rice vinegar, look for one that is unseasoned. They sell others that are seasoned for sushi or sushi rice, which have sugar and salt added. Just read the label, as always. So this is unseasoned rice vinegar. I have some minced garlic. So garlic, you'll see in a lot of these recipes, I like it, like a lot of people do, but it also has a lot of heart health benefits. It lowers both LDL or bad cholesterol, as well as blood pressure. So very heart healthy for those 2 reasons. I have a small amount of sugar here. This is optional if you don't want to use any added sugar, but it's just a tiny bit. And if you're using the coconut aminos that I showed you, those are kind of naturally sweet from the coconut, so you may not need that. And then I have a chopped scallion or green onion or spring onion, one plant, many names. I have some crushed red pepper flakes for heat, optional if you don't like that. And I have some toasted sesame seeds. And so basically I'm going to stir it all together and the sauce will be ready. And this is a very flavorful sauce. It can be used as like a dumpling dipping sauce. We're going to use it to add flavor to the grain bowl I'll be using the tofu for Asian style grain bowl today. You could actually use it to make an Asian style vinaigrette if you thinned it out with more vinegar. So many options here. Again, I'm showing you some specific recipes, but I really encourage you to make your cooking easier, faster, and not waste any food, to think of other ways of using the same recipes. Okay, so we've got that sauce ready just like that. The next one I'm going to show you is going to be a Mediterranean style grain bowl, sauce. This is going to be used with a tahini base. So let me get all my ingredients out here and I'll walk you through this very quickly. So tahini is made out of ground sesame seeds. I've already measured mine out here in this container. And seeds and nuts are great sources of heart-healthy monounsaturated fat, as well as trace elements like minerals like zinc, which is important for your immune function. So everything here, I'm mainly focusing on, wow, this is how you make it. It tastes really good, but everything is here for a purpose too. So the other ingredients that are going into this, and I'm going to show you here how I label things so I don't have food waste, is what it is and the date. And this will be so that you can keep track of things in your refrigerator. So I have some more ground garlic here. I have some cayenne pepper. So we have garlic, we have a little bit of heat. Again, these are adjustable or optional depending on your preferences. To balance out the flavors, I have a little bit of maple syrup. Again, optional if you're not adding any added sugars, of which maple syrup is a less refined, but still an added sugar. And then I'm going to squeeze directly into this container the juice of a couple of lemons. These are pretty juicy, pretty large lemons. These can vary quite a bit. So I may not need all of it today. I'm going to kind of take a look at that. I'm going to start with one. I might do 1.5. I've made this so many times, so I know what it should look like. And I know that these are pretty juicy lemons today. Yeah, I think I'll just do 1.5. And then I'll adjust later if I feel like it needs more tartness. As you can see, I'm using a citrus squeezer for this. Very handy because it makes the squeezing very easy and also strains out the seeds. But you don't have to have it. You can simply do it with your hands. You can use the tines of a fork also to help get out some of the juice. And then I'm going to stir it. So you can look at the close-up camera here, which I'll try to aim in that direction. And literally, you're just stirring this together. And it should get to the texture of a sauce. But what sometimes happens, and we'll see as I continue to stir, I think it's actually at the right temperature right now, so it's not getting excessively thick. Sometimes it will get too thick. And when that happens, and in fact, I think my lemons were kind of juicier than usual. This is actually a little bit thinner than I usually make it. So I'm not worried about the thickness here. Sometimes it gets too thick and gets like peanut butter. And when you're combining the liquid of the lemon juice with the tahini, if that happens, you can just add a little bit of water, which is why I brought some here, a little bit at a time, and keep stirring until it's smooth again. It will, as it sits, get a little bit thicker again. So I think we're going to arrive at just the right texture when that happens. It's going to be, I would like it a little bit thicker than this, but this is actually okay. So this is a tahini sauce, our second sauce that we'll be using today. And then the third one I'm going to show you is actually a pesto. So pesto, let me just move my food processor here. Pesto, as most of you know, is traditionally made out of basil, pine nuts, olive oil, Parmesan cheese, and some salt and pepper. I'm going to make this just to kind of add a little bit more nutrition with kale, which I have here. Okay, I've already chopped up some kale. I'm going to add that to the bowl of my food processor. And then instead of pine nuts, which can be very expensive, I'm going to use sesame seeds. This also makes it allergen free for people who have tree nut allergies, but of course not if you have a sunflower seed allergy. So that's my substitution there. And then I have basil. I'm using kind of a 2-to-1 ratio of basil, of kale to basil, but we'll still get that nice basil flavor that you all know and love in your pesto, but with kale added for additional nutrition. And we're just going to combine it all together in the food processor with a little bit of olive oil, which we can add to if needed. So let me get that going here. And this comes together really quickly. I didn't add salt yet. That will need to be stirred in as well. So that's almost done. I need to push down the leaves and the seeds a little bit to make sure it all gets combined in. You can make it as smooth or as kind of chunky as you like it. And you may need to add a little bit of oil to kind of bring it together. I think this will need a little bit more, but first I'll make sure I chop it all. Okay, I'm going to add a little bit more olive oil. But you can see how easy this is. Ideally, you'll have, I love this as one of my small kitchen helpers, a mini food processor or chopper, but you don't need it. If you don't have it, you can literally chop it. It takes longer to chop it with a knife. Okay, so I think that looks pretty good here. Just gonna remove it. Uh-oh, hope we're not stuck here. There we go. And I'll put it into a bowl so that you can see it better. And again, depending on how the texture that you want, you can still add a little bit more olive oil if you need to. But I kind of like the texture of it as it stands right now, which I'll show you in just a second. Okay, so that's our pesto. Make sure you can see it, it's there. And then I actually have a bonus sauce, which I already made, but I'll talk you through it. This is cashew cream. This is kind of magic for plant-based eating, especially for grain bowls. I'm holding it up here, and I'm going to show you how it looks, the texture of it, so you can see. It's nice and thick, kind of like the texture of sour cream or whipped cream. And that's what it's going to be as a plant-based substitute. You can season it with an acid like lemon juice or apple cider or other vinegar and some salt to make it a sour cream substitute. You can leave it as is, as kind of a heavy cream substitute for putting into your pureed soup, for example. You can add a little bit of vanilla and or some sugar to make it a whipped topping as a substitute for whipped cream. Obviously, it's none of these things exactly, but it's great for people who are avoiding dairy. And again, it adds the nutrition of the monounsaturated fats that are found in nuts. So this is made out of cashews. Importantly, and you'll have the recipe for this too, you want to use raw untoasted cashews for this. And what I'm showing you in this jar here, in this small amount, is you want to pre-soak them, which you'll see in the recipe. And then when you put it into the blender, you want to use only half as much water, which might be hard to see on camera here because it's hard to see. But you basically want to look at your blender pitcher and bring the water to just half the height of your cashews and then blend it together. You can always thin it out with more water, but you can't thicken it up except for adding in more cashews. So that's a cashew cream, and that is going to be one of the garnishes for our grain bowls. So with that said, I always take longer than I think to demonstrate a few things. So we're on time here, but I want to make sure I can show you how it all comes together. So let me bring back all those components. The grains, we're going to put the proteins on them, add our vegetables. I'll add a few other garnishes, our sauces, and you'll see how you're going to have 3 different grain bowls just like that. So I'll be right back with everything else. Okay, so let me think about how I want to do this here. So the grain bowl, I didn't actually go over to summarize what the components are, but I'll do that now as I'm assembling these. So the components of a grain bowl are going to be a cooked grain. In this case, let's start with our quinoa, and I think I'll use that with your cannellini beans. Let's do that. So the components are going to be a whole grain, in this case, our quinoa. I'm going to add a flavorful plant-based protein. In this case, we're going to use our cannellini beans. So that's going to go in one section of our grain bowl here. The components of a healthy plate are basically you want 50% different vegetables. You want about 1/4 of a healthy protein, a lean protein. Besides plant-based proteins, things like fish and other seafood, chicken breast will be better than red meat, especially processed meat, for your healthier protein. So that's about 1/4 of it. And then we want to have an array of our beautiful vegetables here. So you can see we have all the colors, Roy G. bit of red, orange, yellow, green, blue, indigo, and violet, which can be tricky for food, but I found ways. So I have some cherry tomatoes here that I sliced in half. I think it kind of tastes better when they're sliced in half, but it also sits better in the bowl. Then I'm going to have, for a second kind of red, some sliced red radishes, which add a different kind of crunch to it, right? And then I have julienne, some carrots. And if you want to work on your knife skills, those are some of the videos that you can see at the site that we're sharing. I have some yellow bell pepper. And of course, you can substitute any other vegetables of all these colors. Just try to get all the different colors. So far what we have lycopene and in our tomatoes, as well as vitamin C in our radishes, beta carotene, vitamin A in our carrots. We have more vitamin C in our bell pepper, red, orange, yellow. Then we have green, green here with some cucumbers. And where are my leafy greens? I almost forgot. Leafy greens are key with everything. We're going to have some more green with our leafy greens. And then for the hardest color to get, the blue, indigo, and violet, I have some purple radishes that I've sliced as well. Try to make sure you can see all the different components here. And then I made some pickled red onions. So I think that counts as violet. You could also use, purple sweet potatoes, eggplant to get all these colors. So I think that looks pretty good so far. But what are we missing in this one? We're missing a sauce. So I think since we have cannellini beans, I'm going to use our pesto here, kind of in this sort of, the cannellini beans are used in Italian cooking. So for our Italian theme. And I'm just going to put that actually on top of the beans right now so you can see them. And then we want actually a little bit of creaminess. So as I mentioned, the components are whole grains, protein, lots of vegetables. To tie it all together, a little bit of creaminess is always nice. The avocado that I bought that I usually add to grain bowls didn't ripen by today, but the cashew cream fills in nicely. What does the creaminess do? Well, first of all, most people like a creamy texture, but it's often made out of saturated fat, i.e. dairy sources. Adding the monounsaturated fat from the cashew cream fulfills that desire for creaminess that also builds satiety, keeping you full and satisfied. And then sometimes a little bit of crunch is nice too. And so for that, we can add some nuts or seeds. And I have some chopped up pistachios here that I'm just going to sprinkle around to add, okay? So that's our first grain bowl. I'm going to move on to the other two. The next one I'm going to do, let's see how I want to do this here. I think I'm going to use the wild rice as the base. move this. Towards the end of any of these classes, I run out of space, but we'll be okay here. So I'm going to put my tofu as my protein here. So we're going to kind of build an Asian grain bowl here. And so we've got the tofu. Of course, rice is the main grain consumed in Asian countries. Typically not wild rice, although in my reading I saw that there is a Chinese version of wild rice, but I haven't seen that. But this is in the place of white rice that I'm using it here. And then we're going to use our soy-based sauce to drizzle on the tofu, which is kind of the perfect topping here. We'll do the same thing and add a bunch of our colorful vegetables. So again, red, orange, yellow, green, blue, indigo, violet. I don't want to make these all exactly the same, so I'm going to vary how these look a little bit. I think it wouldn't be wrong to have cashew cream here also. Again, we want some creaminess. And so I'm going to, this time, drizzle that onto the vegetables. You can see kind of different ways of plating this. I'm going to add a little bit more around here. So we've got a little swirl of our cashew cream. And then I still want some crunch, but I'm going to, again, for variety's sake, I'm going to, the nuts that actually would make more sense for this, but I didn't bring them out for this demo, would be more cashews in their intact form, maybe some roasted cashews, or perhaps sesame seeds, or peanuts. But I have pepitas here, pumpkin seeds, and they add a nice crunch as well. So I'm going to add them here, and I'll put them sort of where the green is. And you could certainly add some herbs, perhaps some cilantro, to add a little bit more green here. I'm going to add some of my leafy greens, just because we also need more vegetables in this one. And the leafy green I'm using for this demo is arugula. I love arugula because I love the flavor of it. I'm going to bring this a little bit closer. But it also makes a nice garnish because it's already a nice shape. So again, think about the visual with all of those. And I think I'm running out of time, so I'm going to make my last one very quickly. This is going to be the one we're going to make with the chickpeas. And for that, we've got our smoky Spanish chickpeas here. I'm going to use the barley as the base. And let me grab this spoon. So same thing, adding that to be about a quarter of our grain bowl here for our protein component. It makes a lot of sense. Chickpeas go with tahini sauce often, like in falafel. So I'm going to use that as our sauce here. Just showing you various ways of putting the sauce on. And then, as we did before, add our rainbow of vegetables. So hopefully this is giving you a lot of ideas, right? This is the mix and match. So I wanted to talk, but you'll read also in the handout more about how you can do this for meal prep. All of the grains can be pre-made, refrigerated for up to a week, or they can be frozen in serving sizes that you can pull out of the freezer and defrost another time. Some of the grains are quick cooking, like the quinoa. Some take actually 30 to 40 minutes, like the barley. Farro also takes that amount of time. Wild rice does as well. So you can make those in advance. That's a very important thing for your planning. And then the sauces that I showed you can all keep in the refrigerator also for optimal flavor, 5 days, but up to 7. And then you can mix and match. So you could think about putting all these components out. I heard actually I was told this interesting idea about my kitchen from my daughter who just graduated from college, that she was told by her friends who saw from how she cooks that she comes from an ingredients household. And I was like, what does that mean? Doesn't everyone cook from ingredients? She said, no, a lot of people buy prepackaged foods, snacks. All we have are seeds and nuts, fruits and vegetables and grains. I'm like, isn't that everything? But at any rate, so that is basically what we have here. But you can think you've now pre-prepped these ingredients so that if you have a family and everyone likes to eat differently, people can assemble, their own. I hope that you find this, attractive looking, easy, simple, appealing, and that will make it very simple for you to cook. I know I was supposed to leave time for questions and answers, and I think we have a few minutes.
Okay, excellent. This
Okay.
looks amazing. We've been all talking in the chat about how great it probably smells in your kitchen.
Drooling.
Yeah, exactly. It is amazing. I do want to mention again the cookbook. Amy's going to put a link for that. What I like about the cookbook that's different than other cookbooks I've seen is that you have a section on geographic foods. So
Yes.
some from California or Asia or Middle East, Mediterranean. It's kind of fun and neat, and I do like that. Please make sure you're downloading your handout right now. We only have 44% of you downloading it, but I know there were a lot of questions about the recipes. So let's get those down. And then let's go through the questions. We're going to do like surefire.
Hey, Michelle, on that note, we are going to have a recording and the handout. If you do not have a Full Plate Living account already, if someone lovely shared this with you to join us, thank them for that. But we do have a free membership, FullPlateLiving.org. I'll put a link in there. We do share all of this stuff in our member email for everyone. So I will put that in the chat right now.
So the first question, how long will the bowls hold? How long can you refrigerate them for?
Yeah, so they can keep, I would say for optimal flavor and texture, a couple of days, depending on the grain. Sometimes when a grain is refrigerated, it gets a little bit cold. You can certainly rewarm it in a microwave for really just a few seconds, but then your vegetables might, they'll be cooked. So depending on how you want to do it, I would keep it as separate components. Mm-hmm. If you keep everything separate and assemble later, you've got 5 to 7 days to use all these different components.
Excellent. If you were going to freeze all of these, would you freeze them as separate components then? Again, just the same as refrigerating?
Yeah, I think it's always best to freeze things separately because everything has different water content, and so that can affect the texture.
Okay, and what about the pesto? How long will that last in the fridge?
In the fridge, I would give it 1 to 2 weeks, but you can also freeze it. And again, for like simple serving sizes, you can actually freeze it in an ice cube tray, which is kind of a trick from when making my homemade baby food, and put an extra layer of oil on top, and then you'll have like a single size serving.
Perfect. Love that. Okay, let's talk about food allergies. So what is an alternative to tahini if somebody's allergic to sesame?
I think it's hard to find, I think actually it's hard to find something exact because the flavor is really sesame, but for the texture, for a creamy thing, you could use the cashew cream. You could use peanut butter, sunflower seed butter, almond butter, any other nut butter. It'll just taste different. But the idea is just that you have basically a ground cedar nut butter for it.
Okay, excellent. Talk to us about olive oils. What would be a good olive oil from Walmart?
I don't know the brands there, but what I would say kind of general concepts are try to find one that is extra virgin. It has the most in terms of antioxidants in it. It also will have the most flavor. Try to get one that is just pure olive oil. Sometimes it'll be a combination of olive oil plus another type of oil, and that won't give you the full health or flavor benefit.
Okay, thank you for that. What temperature were you cooking your tofu and chickpeas at?
So it'll depend on the heat of your stove, but generally somewhere around a medium high will work for both of those.
Okay, perfect. All right, restaurant foods. When you ask for a plain salad dressing on the side at the restaurant, will that have salt in it?
Typically not, but you can always ask about that. Usually the salt will be in the dressing itself.
Okay, excellent. Okay, a couple questions about tofu, and I'm going to do these both back to back, so we'll only have one up. Okay. Can you air fry the tofu?
You can. And I have tried it using this method. So yes, spray it with a little bit of oil as you might for any other air fried thing. You might need to turn it over halfway. And I would start really fast, like again, with 5 minutes. It'll depend on your air fryer too. Okay, so just kind of up the time instead of starting for a long time. Yes. Okay. What's the best way to store the tofu? So whenever you're storing anything that's been cooked, let it cool a little bit first, and then just put it in a container and like anything else and cover it tightly. Excellent. And I think this might be the last question we're going to touch on. Okay. What about the issue of lectins in whole grains as well as beans? I've heard people say it in both. I am not excessively concerned about that, but pre-soaking, cooking will kind of take care of that actually. And I do think if you're only eating beans all the time on their own, that is more of an issue. But combining your foods, rotating the types of foods that you have can help with that. But pre-soaking, cooking, and sprouting are the ways that you can deal with that concern.
Thank you so
Thank
much.
you so much for having me. And I hope this is helpful to all of you. Take care.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Okay, bye.